y'all, and thanks again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale. And as always, sitting over here across the table from me, sipping on his, I think he's got a Sprite in here actually this time. He may have an upset tummy. Mr. Kyle, I have an upset tummy, Phil.
How's it going, everybody? No, that is an old can. That's probably from a couple days ago when I was up here working. But I don't have an upset stomach. I feel fine. Good. I got a bottle of water here. I've already had about 3 cups of coffee, so I'm good. I'm doing very good, man. I'm enjoying life. I'm trying to. Man, I'm telling you what. Whenever you go on a vacation and you don't work for like 10 days, it is hard to get back into the groove of it. So this week has kind of been a struggle. I didn't do as many jobs as I wanted to do, but I'm slowly getting back into the grind. And now, of course, I got a deadline with Thanksgiving coming up on Thursday.
Yeah.
So I've got to cram a whole week's worth of work into 3 days. So the next 3 days are not going to be very much fun for me. But then I have Thanksgiving, and then Friday after Thanksgiving is Luke's birthday. He's turning 6. So I don't know what we're going to do then. And then Sunday is your birthday.
Yep.
So I got a lot of festivities over the next couple of days.
We're having drinks Saturday.
And did you say sushi or something?
We'll probably go do the sushi thing and then roll up there and start having some drinks. We may go for like a brunch. We may do sushi brunch.
Sushi is good.
Right about lunchtime.
I'm always a fan of sushi, but man, I like papacitos too. That's all. You can never go wrong with papacitos.
I wish you hadn't brought that up.
My favorite is just you order the fajitas, but you don't even load up on the tortillas. You just that butter with the chicken. You know what I'm talking about? That like garlic butter they whip up.
I wish you hadn't brought that up. Well, looks like looks like we'll have to run over there and have some of those.
But you know what I'm saying? That's my favorite part is just that butter and that chicken, man. I don't know what they put in there. I don't know if they sprinkle like crystal meth.
I'm okay with it.
It's very addictive. You're just like, I could eat a pound of this.
A dab of garlic butter? Is that what you're talking about? Doing
something.
A dab of
They're
garlic
putting
butter?
Something in there. Yeah, they got some kind of rig. They got in the back in the kitchen. Yeah. Someone was trying to explain to me that recently, and I was like, I don't even know what. I mean, I understand the concept that it's like, wow, again, another indication that I'm turning old because you're just like, what happened to just like rolling them?
Yeah, what happened with just smoking a joint? I don't understand why you got to have all this equipment. It's just like we laugh about with drinking. Like, what's wrong with just having a beer? Why do I got to have all this other stuff? I don't get it. Or like we said, I can't just have a glass of bourbon.
You can't just have a glass of wine. You can't have a glass of wine. No, you have to decant the wine. You have to let it sit in the air for a certain amount of time. You know,
so much work.
I know it's there. I just got back from wine country. I'm not hating on sommeliers or anybody that's a connoisseur. I'm just saying it's too much for me.
It's because I'm too old.
I just don't have enough time. That's something I needed to start when I was in my early 20s, I guess.
By and now, you're an uncultured scumbag also, too.
That's part of it, yeah. Yeah, very Cro-Magnon-like, very primitive.
I can't help it.
That's probably what it is. It's for intellectuals.
That's exactly what it is.
I'm happy with a Miller Lite or like a Shiner Bock, and like I said, just some chicken.
Yeah.
And some garlic butter. You got to throw the butter.
Yeah. I've got some bad news, Brad.
Uh-oh.
I shot the worst round of disc golf in months today at the little championship that we had here for our club.
Oh, no.
Wheels off. I was terrible. I have no excuses other than I'm a terrible disc golfer to start with, and I was even more terrible today.
It's bound to happen, though, because you've been playing really good for a guy that just started 6 months ago or whatever.
And the wheels come completely off today, man.
Because you got me into it, and when I went out there, I was like, man, he's really good.
Here's the thing. I don't even know. It wasn't like I was only bad at one thing. You know what I mean? It's one of those, we've all done, anybody that's ever been involved in sports or anything like that. If you have a hitch in your swing in baseball, you can kind of tell it, but your fielding's on point or vice versa, anything like that. Today, everything I did was wrong. It's like I should have just left.
You need a slump buster, my friend.
I need something to get me over this bad dry. I blamed it on the cold at first because it was like 34 when we first started out.
Did you use the hot hands that I gave you?
Actually, no.
Jack the Deuce? No.
I've got them, but I didn't use them. Because it started warming up pretty quick. That's why I couldn't use it as an excuse. I threw some crappy shots, and 2 holes later, it was warm weather now, and I'm still throwing crappy shots, so I don't have any excuse.
Maybe you've been playing too much.
Maybe that's what you know what I need? I need some turkey, some tryptophan, some mashed potatoes, some cranberry. I just need something along those lines.
Speaking of birds and turkeys, you said something about a Thunderbird sighting.
This is awesome. You know how much we love these folks. We love some crazy Thunderbird sightings. And, this would be a heck of a bird to have for Thanksgiving. And this is a teacher spots Thunderbird in Tennessee. This comes from our friends at Cryptozoology News. Columbia, Tennessee. It says a man in Maury County says he saw an unidentified bird that he believes could be a Thunderbird. 43-year-old teacher, L. Broyles, told Cryptozoology News that he was driving when he saw the animal at about 1:30 p.m. on October 28th. He said that it was light brown and the wingspan was 10 to 12 feet. Now, before we go any further, I like that he's saying this, 10 to 12 feet. It's not like the wings were 30 foot. It's not like, because sometimes we get these reports of these monstrous birds. Now, I'm not saying they're not real, but is it more believable because they're 10 or 12 feet? Because, that's a big bird, right. But it's not like, Cessna bird is what we're talking about. Now, it says here that he claims that the sighting lasted about 1 minute and that he's never seen anything like this before. And he said that the bird was feathered, but he didn't mention any other features about its head or its beak. Now, the Thunderbird, it says here, is known as the rock, of course, by the nomenclature of the Native Americans, which, we've covered that. And we've also covered the one that was allegedly killed by the ranchers there in Arizona in the 1890s. And they even touch base on this thing here. And then we've talked about several of them on here. But I do like the fact that he brought up that, and that was it. That's all he said, is he didn't see anything fancy about its head. It was just a large bird. Now, you have brought up like the condors or the golden eagles and stuff like that. Would 10 to 12 feet, I'm asking you like you're some kind of ornithologist or whatnot, would 10 to 12 feet, you think, fit the wingspan of one of those? I would believe that they would.
Yeah.
What's a golden eagle? Look that up right quick over there, young Jamie. What's a golden eagle's?
I'll look it up. Yeah, hold on. Google it.
The wingspan, because like I said, we get a lot of these stories and these accounts where their wingspans are monstrous. But 10 to 12 feet?
7 feet 8 inches is the average. It's the average. So there could be an outlier that's much larger. That's right, yeah.
Okay. Well, what if, like we talked about, what if somebody had one? I don't know why you would have one, as a pet, other than unless you were like a falconer. Isn't that what it is? A falconer, whatever.
Yeah. An Andean or a Californian condor average is 10 feet.
Oh, for reals, though?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that son of a gun flew on down to Tennessee to see what was up.
Well, like we're talking about when a perspective or scale, you could easily underestimate or overestimate a wingspan or something you see by 2 feet, don't you think?
Yeah.
I play games sometimes and I'm like, I wonder how far that is, like, because I measure houses and things like that. And I'll be like, I bet you it's about 30 feet. And you're going to, it's 33 feet. Or 27 feet. I was close.
Well, we used to do it all the time when we shot a lot of archery tournaments. When you shot, where it was the unknown yardage, shooting the 3D, like the foam animals, and you had to guess it. And I remember doing a lot of that. So, but 10 to 12 feet is in the wheelhouse of a totally easily for me to believe animal. I don't know why the 30-footer. I guess, you know what my thing is? It's not the fact that they couldn't get that big. It's the fact of where would something that big hide?
Well, I feel the same way when it comes to like Bigfoot sightings. When you say I saw one and it was 8 feet tall, you're like, yeah, okay, I get that.
But 12?
Yeah, when you start saying 12 to 14 feet, then you're like, I don't know.
I don't know why, and I don't know why it is. It's not the person telling the story. It's not that that's any more or unbelievable than an 8-footer. I don't know why that, but it is. Something about it just doesn't feel right.
I agree with you. Well, speaking of turkeys, another animal that's popular during this time of year is deer. Now, what most people may not know is deer actually cause a lot of accidents. They say during an average year, 1.23 million car accidents a year are caused by hitting deer. And that's just in the United States. And they said that some of these accidents actually cause fatalities. And a recent poll I found claims that the average amount of damage caused in one of these accidents is $3,500 per accident. So it's a big problem. But recently, a lady had a very bizarre problem with a deer. She thinks she hit a ghost deer.
Wait, what?
Yeah, check this out. She said, my daughter and I were coming home from her birthday party at my parents' house on the night of November 16th, 2017, and we live in northern Maine. All, in all caps, the roads are rural in Maine. Animal collisions are as common as stoplights in the city. Having driven these roads for 25 years, I'm very attentive when it comes to driving at night. Tonight, or the night in question, a huge buck appeared in the middle of the road. There were no other cars when we were on a straightaway highway. There was no reason I wouldn't have seen this animal wander out from the woods. It was like someone turned the deer light on. He just appeared out of nowhere. And when I saw him, I slammed my brakes on and veered to the right. He turned around and went left. I hit him on my driver's side headlight. Now, I must stress to you, I know I hit him. I heard the metal crunch. He went sprawling across the road, and my daughter heard the bang and asked me what just happened. I just stammered, I think I hit a deer. I pulled over to the side of the road, put my four-ways on, and composed myself. I've hit an animal in the past, but this was different. Around here, when you see an animal on the road, usually cars will pull over and stop to help you. Someone hits a rabbit, and 50 people will stop to make sure the driver is okay. But no one was stopping or even slowing down this time. This confused me greatly. I finally got out to see the damage to my car and to call the game wardens. There wasn't a thing on the car. Nothing. The headlights, the fender, they were perfect. There was no hair, no blood, no deer in the road. Nothing was wrong. Well, when the police and game wardens finally showed up, I told them what had happened. And the police checked out my car, and the wardens looked for the deer. Now, this is an everyday occurrence in these guys' professions, and they wouldn't have missed an animal that was wounded by a car, even if it had crawled into the field or the bushes nearby. This deer was a good-sized buck, I'm telling you. It had a huge rack on his head. He had to be injured just by the sheer impact of my car. I was going 55 miles an hour, and I know I collided with its front legs. All I kept saying was, I know I hit the deer. We heard the bang, both of us. We heard the metal crunch, and we heard the lamp glass breaking. I saw the deer fly by my window into the road. I even got out my bright spotlight and looked into the ditch, the bushes, and the fields nearby. Not even small animals had been crossing into the bushes. My daughter kept asking the police if the deer was okay, but they kept telling her there was no animals in the road. She looked at them as if they were nuts. She said, I saw the deer go by my window, and I heard the loud bang. I could hear the glass breaking, she told one of the wardens. She said, you need to make sure he's not hurt in the bushes. Now, I know it wasn't my imagination. My daughter saw and heard the same thing I did. But not one car slowed down, and eventually when the first one did show up, the deer, it wouldn't have had the time to pull itself across the road in that amount of time. It would have had some damage, and I would have had some damage, to the front end of my car. It's a 2005, so the front bumper is pretty much Rubbermaid plastic. There would have been at least some scratches on the hood or the front fender. Sorry for the long story, but I've never encountered a ghost deer car accident. I know that I'm lucky that that's all that happened. Now, I've seen moose and deer collisions in the past that ended with severe casualties. I've heard of people being decapitated by hooves or racks or antlers going through windshields, and I've actually seen cars torn apart by sheer force alone. So what do you think what was that? Like a time slip or something?
That is
her and her daughter, 14 years old, felt the impact. They heard it. They both saw it. They heard the glass breaking. I mean, you know when you hit something or not. Everybody's hit something on the road before accidentally, even if it's just like the rubber from a blown tire. You're like, oops, oh man, I hope that didn't cause any damage, I think you said that you guys were driving in a work truck one time.
Ran over a mattress.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I ran over a mattress.
And you could feel it, right?
Oh, yeah, that was you were all about this mattress.
So there's nothing there. Nothing.
I don't even have a speculative guess on some, a double guess, a guess. I have nothing for this.
Yeah, bizarre.
I mean, there's nothing. What could you, like you said, a time slip? Maybe. There's not, she saw it, she heard it.
They both saw it and both heard it.
This is crazy.
I mean, the daughter was with her. Well, you wouldn't think it was just a singular event. You could be like, man, maybe I dozed off and I imagined that or something. Yeah. Not for two people, there's no way.
Nah, that's not that's...
Ghost deer. Who even knew there was such a thing?
I don't want to see one.
No.
I'm out on that whole thing.
If I saw ghost deer, I definitely would be like, they're mad for all that I've harvested in the past.
It's over. I'm dead. This is where I'm dead. This is where exactly. Well, you were talking about wine country earlier, and I know with Thanksgiving coming up here in the States, everybody might have a little sip of wine, when they're done with the evening meal. But for those of you that are interested, livescience.com, 8,000-year-old jars. Now, I don't mean 8,000 one-year-old jars, folks, not year-olds. 8,000-year-old are the earliest evidence of winemaking.
Nice.
8,000 years.
Wonder how good that tastes.
It says people were fermenting grapes into wine about 8,000 years ago in what is now the Republic of Georgia. So scientists have found this, and it's now considered the oldest known winemaking site on record. Now, we always cover the beer sites that they keep coming up with this older beer. But apparently, some archaeologists have found these ceramic jars, and there's evidence of winemaking during an excavation of 2 Neolithic sites. Now, I would love to pronounce these for you.
Please try.
Gadachrili, Gora, and Shulaveris Gora. That sounds actually like a type of wine. And that's in the South Caucasus is where it is, about 30 miles south of Bilsby, Georgia's capital. So, it says now previously, the oldest evidence of it was in the Zagros Mountains of Iran, and that was about 5,500 BC.
Mm-hmm.
So now the new discovery is dated to 6,000 BC. So it's close to 1,000 years, they say, earlier than what was additional or originally thought of what's going on. But it's funny to me that we keep finding this, that it's not a new thing, that drinking wine isn't a new thing. Now, here's what's cool. Now, it says that during the excavation in Georgia, they uncovered fragments of these ceramic jars, and that while analyzing the chemical residue on these shards of this ceramic from 8 of these jars, they found a tartic acid. There was a fingerprint compound of grapes and wine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, this is Stephen Batuk, who is a senior research associate in the Department of Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations and the Archaeological Center at the University of Toronto. Now, that's a mouthful. You have to carry 2 cards with that. And he said during this whole thing that we believe this is the oldest example of the domestication of a wild-growing Eurasian grapevine solely for the production of wine.
Man.
So this is something that goes, that's back a ways. So what we talk about is, when do you think they're going to find it even older? But this is something else Stephen said, that Georgia is home to over 500 varieties of for wine alone. So he believes that the grapes have been domesticated and crossbreeding in this region for quite some time now. So this area is known for it in that area. So maybe they're going to come up with more and more and more of much older. My thing is this: did they invent it, or did somebody teach them? So if somebody taught them, how much further back does it go? What if it's another 2,000 years? What if it's another 10,000 years?
Yeah.
Wine's good.
Well, you got to think too, back then, they didn't have as many options as we do today. You didn't have thousands of soft drinks and teas and lemonades. And basically back then, what did you have to drink? You had water. You might have had some milk. And you might have had mead and wine.
Well, he even talks about how this, and he's quoted in saying this, that it was like this, let me start over with this. Before this, he leads up that these ancient societies were awash in wine, and that he says that it permeated nearly every aspect of their life, including medical treatments, special celebrations, and everyday meals. And he's quoted saying that as a medicine, social lubricant, mind-altering substance, and highly valued commodity, wine became the focus of religious cults, pharmacopoeias, cuisines, economics, and society throughout the ancient Near East.
Man, I will say, all jokes aside, sometimes a glass of wine actually does enhance whatever you're eating, or vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
It really does. Like, if you find somebody that can pair things real well, like Dana can.
Yeah.
You can really bring it, like oysters and champagne. If you ever had those two together, it's amazing. You're like, wow, they really complement each other. I had no idea.
It's wild.
When you have them together, it's like, wow, that really enhances the flavor.
Well, you're going to like this, because Stephen goes on to say that the Eurasian grapevine that now accounts for 99.9% of wine made in the world today has its roots in Caucasia.
Man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Speaking of cool, check this out. On the evening of February 3rd, 1983, a woman had visited a friend in Mobile, Alabama, and when the friend's husband arrived home from work, Mr. Norris, or Miss Norris, left and headed home on Highway 90. Now, as she turned off the highway, she heard an explosion, and at this point, her car began to vibrate, making it difficult for her to steer. Perhaps she hit a ghost deer. She negotiated another turn off the road she was on, which brought the car to a halt. She opened the car door and leaned out to ascertain the cause of the problem. Now, Miss Norris continued driving and the vibrating stopped. She turned onto another road and saw that the woods ahead were brilliantly illuminated. At first, she thought that there was a helicopter search in progress because of the lights, and she began to get frightened. She again stopped the car, and at this point, she sighted a huge object about a half a mile west of her. She later thought that the explosion she had heard earlier was perhaps the object coming down over a clay and gravel pit in the vicinity. Now, the thing was huge, later estimated to be 7 to 8 stories high and 6 telephone poles wide, and appeared to be moving toward her at 4 or 5 miles per hour. The evening had been clear and cool, and she had driven the car with the windows closed. After the explosion, she noted a chopping wind, a high-pitched sound, and again a roaring sound, as well as the vibration. She noted the whipping of the wind like a tornado. When the object reached a point fairly close to Miss Norris, the object halted and all of the noise stopped. It was completely silent, and Miss Norris lost all the fear she had felt before. She then got out of the car to get a better look. She strained to take in every detail, feeling like a child with an unbelievable happiness, she claimed. Now, Carl Norris, who's Pat's husband, said that although his wife told him of her sighting after it happened, he didn't realize how important it was to her until she started checking books out of the local library pertaining to UFOs and related subjects. Miss Norris estimated the time duration of the sighting as 5 minutes. As the craft appeared, Miss Norris's attention was drawn to the top deck, which had a long window she estimated to be 53 feet, and through which she viewed 20 to 30 persons on board, apparently oblivious of her presence, walking about as if they were changing shift. The wall behind them was curved and white. There were no instruments. The people did not appear to be looking out the window. The beings were pale-skinned and dressed in white one-piece suits. She judged them to be about 5 feet 10 inches tall, quite slender, but with chests larger than ours, the top of the head more prominent, and they had no hair. She noticed nothing out of the ordinary about their eyes. What did draw her attention was the great grace of their movements. The overall atmosphere seemed sterile, she said. Now, below this top deck window was an opaque window. The area around it was all white. This lower window was in sections and was inset. The glass appeared to be tinted. Below the center of the craft, a door was closing from right to left. All across the craft, she saw rivets and portholes. She said she could see the portholes as she peered into the craft. She saw some construction that included huge I-beams that they put ships together with, and beams holding the glass in there. The bottom side was tiered upwards. The construction reminded her of a ship or a submarine. She said it seemed possible that it could have been constructed here on Earth. The very bottom of the craft was formed into a cross made with 1-foot mirrors, and an observation deck hung down around the bottom with beings in it. In this case, she said, unlike the top deck, the people were peering out. While overhead, she heard a very low-pitched but clearly audible, almost like a growl announcement coming from the area of the observation deck. Now, Miss Norris said she believed that the beings didn't realize she was there until they were directly over her position. She saw 4 pipes projecting 6 to 8 feet out from the craft, set in 3 or 4 foot square boxes. They had a hollow flange on the end like a tank cannon, and she believed it looked like some type of weapon. The craft took a southerly turn as it went from where she was parked. She said it was staying in the wooded area and did not cross Highway 90 again. It lit up the wooded area and the area beneath it as it moved on. It had white spotlights on it, and it had blue and red lights on its sides that intermingled, pointing up to the clouds and then down to Earth. After the object was out of sight, Miss Norris continued home and eventually arrived there at 1:10 a.m. Now, what a bizarre sighting. It's almost like...
That is an insane story.
Like a futuristic Zeppelin that was like a tour, right? Like it was like giving a tour of Earth. Like these beings had come on like a destination vacation.
Time slip tour.
Like people take a cruise or something. Like me and my wife, we took a ferry when we were just in San Francisco that takes you out and drives you around Alcatraz, takes you out to the Golden Gate Bridge. It's almost like that. Like this is an interdimensional tour that this craft goes on, and it's got a spotlight, and there's people, they're making announcements like up to the next area. You'll be seeing, whatever.
Everyone look if you look to the right of the Zeppelin.
Yeah. This is rural Alabama. Those are called
dirigibles.
Cows. Yeah, and there's some crazy looking human looking at us. What a bizarre story.
It's very bizarre.
That took place back in 1983, and it's the very first sighting of a UFO I've ever read of or read about that. It sounds like that's exactly what it is. It's like a tour bus.
It sounds like a tour bus. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome. I like that.
Well, speaking of crazy and awesome, after the break, I'm going to be talking about the Boogeyman and actually some Boogeyman stories from different parts of the world. So stay with us, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. most of us can easily recall being told scary stories as a child of a mysterious, creepy figure called the Boogeyman that hides in the closet or under your bed. During our formative years, any bump in the night was attributed to this ghoul that seemed to lurk around every corner. But what are the true origins of the Boogeyman? Where did this universal tale come from? Well, the word originates from the Middle English word bogle, which means hobgoblin. Another early origin can be traced back to the word bugbear, which was once used to describe the goblin, scarecrow, bear mashup that hunted and ate small children. Almost every culture seems to have their own version of the creature, with many different varieties of spelling, but the one thing that remains the same is the use of the story as a tool to scare children into behaving or going to bed. In many countries, a boogeyman variant is portrayed as a man with a sack on his back who carries naughty children away. This is true for many Latin countries, such as Brazil, Portugal, Spain, and the countries of Spanish America, where he was referred to as El Hombre del Costal or El Hombre del Saco, and sometimes in Portuguese, Homem do Saco, all of which means the sack or bag man. Sometimes he's called El Robo Chicos, meaning child stealer. Similar legends are very common in Eastern Europe as well. In Bulgaria, Torbalan means sackman, as well as in Haiti and some countries in Asia. In Spain, parents will sing lullabies or tell rhymes to children, warning them that if they do not go to sleep, El Coco will come to get them. The rhyme originated in the 17th century and has evolved over the years, but still retains its original meaning. In the countries of Eastern Mediterranean area, children who misbehave are threatened with a creature known as Babà. In Italy, he is portrayed as a tall man wearing a heavy black coat with a black hood or hat which hides his face. Sometimes parents will knock loudly under the table, pretending that someone is knocking at the door, and say something like, "Here comes Babà. He must know there's a child in here who doesn't want to drink his soup." Now, their version of the boogeyman is not supposed to eat or harm children, but just take them away to a mysterious and frightening place. There's even a popular lullaby that says he would keep a child with him for an entire year. In Slovenia, the Bav is described as a formless spirit. In Greece and in Cyprus, the equivalent of the boogeyman is known as the Babaloas. Typically, he is said to be hiding under the bed, although the details of his story are adapted by the parents in varieties of ways. In Egypt, the Al-Bubu is often depicted as a night creature dressed in black who haunts children that misbehave. And the list goes on and on. Almost every country has its own stories and legends. So my question is, why does almost every single culture, including Native Americans, have these stories about dark and creepy beings preying on young children? How is it that parents from across great oceans, from separate parts of the globe, have all constructed the same narrative? Unless there's more to it than just stories. Could the boogeyman be real? Well, on today's show, I'm going to share a few strange encounters on what the witnesses believe was the boogeyman. Let's begin. This first story is from a young man named Kevin, and he tells a story when he was younger. He said, "My parents entered the room whenever I would scream, and I would always see that there was a man in my room. I remember feeling puzzled as to why this man was there and could not be seen by my parents. This man frightened me, and I would often cry out due to fear. On one occasion, I remember this man coming over to my bed and peering down at me. We both made eye contact, and it slowly dawned on him that I could see him. This seemed to cause a mild panic in the man, and from that night on, he would often come over to me and try to talk with me, which just had the effect of scaring me stupid, and I would yell for my parents. As soon as my parents would come into the room again, the man would back away. All I could say to my parents was that there is a man that I don't like. Of course, my parents looked around, saw nothing, and assumed that it was a bad nightmare. This continued for quite some time, and I was eventually moved from that room to sleep in my parents' room. Here, I always slept well. The episode of the man in my room was totally forgotten until I reached my early to mid-20s, when I started to receive severe spirit contact. During a discussion with my mother, she said that she recalled my man in the room experience. She also added an explanation for it. It turns out that the cottage in which we were living had a previous tenant, an old man with a walking stick, who was disabled and lived most of his later years in the same room that was mine. Because of this man's disability, he would often tap or bang his walking stick on the bedroom floor to get the attention of relatives down below. This man had passed away some years before our tenancy of the college. My parents would often hear this banging in the house, they would say, which would seem to come from upstairs, but whenever they would went to investigate, it always stopped. They just assumed that it was the water pipes. Now, as I learned of the deceased and disabled man and the knocking on the floor of his walking stick, we started to put two and two together and realized that the man I saw in my room and the knocking I heard in the cottage were probably from the same source. The disabled man desperately wanting someone to answer his signal for help. For me, he was the boogeyman. This next story comes from a teenager named Lisa, who said that her little brother, Bobby, age 6, started to get bruises and cuts on his arms, and she believes he was abused by the boogeyman. She said we would ask Bobby what was wrong, and he would say, "That man who comes into my bedroom at night hits me with a belt." Mom would roll her eyes and clean the cuts, thinking he probably cut himself playing around outside. Anyways, one night, when he went to bed, he acted very scared, and he asked Mom to sleep with him. Mom told him no, but she turned on the nightlight. The next morning when Bobby got up, he had a cut below his right eye. Mom figured he scratched himself, so she cut his fingernails. Then, a week later, he got a large bruise on his back. It covered both his shoulder blades, and it really hurt him. So Mom took him to the doctor to see if he had something wrong with him. The doctor asked if he had a babysitter or someone we didn't know very well watching him, because the bruises were probably from a beating, and since he had so many of them. Mom never had anybody babysit us, and she told the doctor this. On a Monday, Mom woke Bobby for school. He said his arm really hurt, and he started screaming. Mom rushed him to the hospital. His arm was broken. I learned from a neighbor while Bobby and Mom were in the hospital that a man used to live in that house in the 1960s with his 2 sons and a daughter. They were all under 7 years of age. He beat them, and one, the older son, even died from a beating. He was arrested and killed himself in jail many years later. The younger boy and girl still lived in the neighborhood. I went to school with one of their children, and I went over to visit. When Mom came to pick me up, the daughter noticed Bobby's broken arm, and she asked my mom what happened, and Mom told her of the strange things that had been happening in Bobby's room. The girl got a look of terrible fear on her face, and she advised Mom to move away. She said that she didn't know about ghosts, but she was sure that Bobby was in danger. The neighborhood was going downhill anyways, so we decided to move. We heard that a few months later that a family had moved in with a 1-month-old baby. The next day, the baby was found dead in its crib. It had a huge cut across its chest and a bruised face. I guess you couldn't even recognize the baby. The parents were tried for child abuse and the death, but no evidence was ever found that they did anything to their baby, so they were released. I am 19 now, and I was about 10 years old when all this went on, but I still remember enough to know that the ghost of that terrible man was abusing my brother. I believe it was the boogeyman. In another strange tale, a woman named Janice talks about a creature that she saw at the end of her bed. She said it was a straight line of doors from the outside door to my brother's door to my room opening. It is very easy and quick to move from outdoors to my room. The outside door was never locked. We lived in the country, and all the neighbors were either friends or family. I had a bad feeling come over me as I was laying down in my bed one night. I heard the outside door open and then close softly. I heard someone walk across the living room into my brother's room and then into my room. I was lying down, so I could not see the end of my bed, I was too terrified to look. I knew something horrible was standing there. I don't know how long I laid there, too scared to look, but I finally could not stand it anymore, and I sat up in bed. It was not a person at all. I sat there frozen, looking at it standing in the bright moonlight, right at the end of my bed. It was inches from the end of my bed. Its body was facing the window to the left of the end of my bed, and it was hunched over, as it was taller than my low ceiling. Its hideous face was turned towards me, with its arms held as if creeping. Its body was covered in hair that looked dark. It was glaring at me. I could feel it was furious with me for not submitting to them. I thought it was going to kill me. I tried to scream, but I could not make a sound. I was trapped in my bedroom with a hairy monster that hated me and wanted me dead. I did what any little girl would do. I lay back down and covered my head, expecting to be killed at any moment. I heard it go back out of my room, through my brother's room, across the living room, and then back out the door. I could still not make a sound. When I did finally get my voice back, I screamed for my mom. She asked me what was wrong, and from her bed I hysterically told her what I had seen. She told me that it was a dream and to go back to sleep. I did not go back to sleep, and it definitely was not a dream. She did not even come over to calm me down, and I never trusted her after that. In this next story, a woman named Martha learned not to put her hand under the bed. Martha said she was at a friend's house for a party, and we were all in her basement just having a good time. Then my friend decided we should all play a game of hide and seek in the pitch black darkness. I had no objection. In fact, I had fun doing those types of things. So, then we shut all the lights off and began. I was picked to be it, so I could hear all of my friends scurry off into various nooks while I fumbled around after the muffled noises. I searched for a long time. I had looked everywhere, except for one room, an especially dark room. It was my last resort. My friends had to be in there. I started to walk down the hallway, feeling against the walls. I entered the doorway, and I had this amazingly bad feeling in my stomach. I felt like going into the room would just be a horrible decision, but as uncertain as I was feeling, I did it anyways. I walked in and discovered that this room was a spare bedroom. I knew there was a bed, and I assumed my friends were underneath it and ready to freak me out, so I thought, better just get it over with. I reached under the bed and began to feel around a bit. That's when it happened. This enormous spark occurred under the bed. I could see its brightness, and it too was loud. The shock vibrated through my whole body. I immediately began to pull back my hand, but it was stopped by something. Something had grabbed my arm. It started to pull me under the bed. Luckily, I was able to retrieve control of my arm and ran from the room. I screamed for my friends, and they popped out and turned the lights on. And they did not come from that room. They came from a totally other side of the basement, and there was no way they could have sneaked past me. We went back into that room, flipped the lights on, and checked under the bed, and there was nothing. This next story is from Brad Steiger's book, Real Monsters, Gruesome Critters, and Beasts from the Dark Side. He gives an interesting tale about a guy named Peter and what he saw. Now, Peter told Brad that when he was a kid, 8 or 9 years old, he was playing hide and seek with his cousins in their parents' house. It was daylight, he emphasized. He was wide awake and was not dreaming. This is what Peter said in his own words. He said, I slipped upstairs, thinking that maybe my younger cousins wouldn't think to look for me on the second floor. I slid under the bed that was in the single room that occupied the guest room. Great. I thought, this is a fantastic hiding place. A few minutes later, I heard someone mount the stairs. I held my breath and listened. It wasn't one of my cousins. The stairs creaked as if whoever it was climbing them had some weight to him or her. This had to be an adult. Great, I assumed. Now I'm going to get in trouble. I followed the creaking sound as it grew louder. I couldn't really see the stairs from where I was. Lying there quietly, I watched from my hiding place as 2 legs strode from the area of the stairs. They were clad in gray dress pants, but the feet were bare. and clawed, with big black claws, and they were covered with gray hair. I think I forgot to breathe at that point. I heard a loud, sniffing sound. I'm not sure where I got the courage to crane my neck and look up, but I did, and when I did, I saw what was likely the most unusual sight of my life, even to this day. It wore a shirt and a bow tie, and its hands were hairy and clawed, just like its feet. It had, I swear, a wolf's head. This thing, whatever it was, seemed to be the living, physical embodiment of the big bad wolf from fairy tales. It stood looming over the bed, just sniffing. I bit my tongue, because I sure as heck knew what would happen if I screamed. I closed my eyes even tighter than I probably have ever closed them before, and I began to pray silently. When I opened them again, it was gone. I didn't leave my hiding place for a long, long time, and when I finally did, I told no one about this, as I knew no one would believe me. So here it is, I'm telling you. Now Brad goes on to talk about how he told Peter that what probably happened is this entity probed his young mind and pulled out the image of the big bad wolf from his knowledge of fairy tales and animated cartoons, and then manifested itself in that shape or form. The entity, being of a horrible negative nature, may manifest in our dimension in a grotesque appearance. In his case, it manifested as a werewolf or a man-wolf, yet with an offbeat touch, like a bow tie. Now, Peter said he thought about it over the years and thought of some great points when it comes to his incident. First, he says it was an isolated incident. It never happened before or since. He says the entity certainly wasn't what I pictured as a werewolf at that point in my life. Aside from the clothing, this was like something out of the movie The Howling, which wouldn't be around for another decade or more. I'd guess my mental image of a werewolf would have been of the Lon Chaney variety at that time in my life. So whatever it was, it either simply looked like it really appeared to me, smashing bow tie and all, or the creature pulled a big bad wolf image from my own psyche. If, in fact, it did pull information from my subconscious, that would indicate that it knew I was in the room. And if it knew I was in the room, then why did it act as if it didn't? My take on this is that it was simply literally trying to scare the hell out of me. It did its job well, but I'm not certain I understand the reasoning behind this, unless it was feeding off the fear I was projecting, or some such pseudoscientific babble. I have also greatly pondered the creaking of the stairs and what seemed to be the entity physically coming into the room. Again, as a supernatural entity, it didn't need to do this, unless, of course, it was building up my inner fear to essentially milk all it could from me. I don't for a second assume this was something physical, even though it behaved as such. What the heck was this thing doing in my cousin's house? It's not something as children we discussed among us. It was simply there, in broad daylight. It's pretty darn bold for something akin to this thing, wouldn't you say? And as no one has ever mentioned seeing anything like it later, is it possible it was just passing through? I don't know. But I believe it probably was the Boogeyman. You see, I think the Boogeyman can take on many forms, and for whatever reason, it appeared to me as a werewolf-like creature, only wearing a bow tie. I don't know, either way, it was very terrifying. So, did these people experience the Boogeyman? Does the Boogeyman take on many forms in order to scare young children? I don't know. But when you go to bed tonight, say your prayers, close your closet, and for heaven's sakes, don't put your arms under the bed. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with expanded perspectives. The Boogeyman is literally everywhere, all over the world. There's hundreds of cultures. I've talked about it with you before privately.
Yeah.
If you go to almost every country on planet Earth, almost every one of them has their own Boogeyman story. They have lots of different names. Now, I just touched on a few here, but probably in some future episodes, I'll be touching on some more, as well as the Elite Show this week. But very interesting. Also, speaking of interesting, Cam, I found something pretty cool you might like.
Picture of me when I was younger?
No, It's pretty interesting. It's about something we talk about all the time, joking around with each other. Is like when I'm driving around with the kids, there's things that you just don't see anymore, like payphones, for instance.
Yeah.
There's an article I found recently where they're talking about disruption, why tech companies like Uber and Twitter. Well, these are big parts of our daily lives, but neither of them make any profit. But do you know what old, once groundbreaking technology that doesn't have any problems making money year after year is?
CB radio.
No, payphones. Apparently, payphones still make a lot of money. They say most people now have a cell phone, of course. So you may have wondered who still uses those rusted quarter-eating boxes. But as it turns out, a lot of people do. According to the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission's 2017 monitoring report, payphones in Canada made $22 million just in 2016. Now, that's spread out, they say, among nearly 60,000 payphones in the country, which made roughly $300 per phone over the course of a year. So that's at least a few phone calls per phone per day. Now, the U.S. numbers are similar. The FCC reports that in 2015, payphones, Cam, made $286 million in 2016.
And this was in Canada.
No, that was in the U.S.
In the U.S.
In Canada, it made $22 million.
Jeez.
Which they say is comparable because of the population in America is 10 times the size.
I never would have guessed that they're still making money.
Right. They said it might not be much in the grand scheme of the multi-billion-dollar telecommunications industry, but it goes to show that some old and decrepit technologies still play a key role in many people's lives. Payphones are out there making money, while some of the newest, hottest, and most successful tech companies around are still trying to figure out how to get their revenues to climb ahead of their yearly losses. Now, another antiquated business that continually pulls in money year after year in huge loads, pardon the pun, is laundromats.
Oh, and I knew that because they've built one here in our town. We've had a couple of old ones, and they built a new one on the north side of town.
Uh-huh.
Dude, that thing is...
I had no idea, but it makes sense. They said this article points out that laundromats are still essential community spaces for people who can't afford personal devices that define much of the modern economy and job market. They say that these spaces and these people also need support, so they use laundromats. And according to the Coin Laundry Association, there are around 35,000 coin laundries in the United States alone, most of which are owner-operated. Now, according to the same report, the industry as a whole generates, get this, $5 billion a year in gross revenue. That's a B, folks. $5 billion.
It says with two L's?
Yeah.
Wow.
This says the profits you can expect to generate from a laundromat vary depending on the size, the efficiency, the popularity of each business, how clean it is, and of course, location, like close to colleges or universities, for instance. But according to the Coin Laundry Association, the cash flow from a laundromat may vary from $15,000 to $500,000 a year, with the average being around $130,000 per year per laundromat. Now, this is because laundromats require few, if any, employees, which reduces running expenses considerably. They said because most cases the owner operates the business himself. So that's another old business that's been around, since laundry machines were invented, that are still being used and still generating a lot of money.
Well, what's funny is because my wife and my sister-in-law both use the laundromat. That's not because I don't have a washer and dryer. It's because we have a lot of quilts.
Yeah, my wife does it for the big thick quilts and
stuff.
And
it's they either send them off to get dry cleaned or they take them there because the washing machines there are monstrous. Now, here's a little thing that I didn't know about. I was talking to a guy at work, and I'm trying to think who it was telling me this, but they were talking about or was it you and me, talking about the machines that you can buy, that you can buy a washing machine still with the center agitator, but you have to buy a certain brand that is the company that makes them commercially for the laundromats. And when you buy them for your home, of course, they're more than a regular washer, but you can get the big ones with the center agitator, and it even has the box on it where you can put the coin acceptor on it if you want to. So I'm like, dude, I need one of those, because you talk about a big monster car or clothing wash. That would be a heck of a thing.
It's a heck of a business if you think about it, though, really. Because like you said, like the article points out, I mean, you don't have to have any employees or nothing.
I wonder how long, I mean, like the wear and tear, I mean, I wonder what the upkeep is on those things.
I was going to say, and I'm sure when you first buy the business, it's probably expensive coming out of the gate because you got to buy every one of those machines.
Yeah.
But it may pay itself. Imagine if you owned, though, like 20 of those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like car washes. I imagine they're a pain to get going, but once you get going, they always seem to be like a thing that makes money.
Well, what makes it funny is, like we've talked about before, imagine if you own one of those red boxes, the things that distribute DVDs and stuff. Yeah, that's really good and money-making, but you can almost already see the waning of those.
Yeah,
but the laundromat is still here.
Yeah.
Since the 50s, it's still here.
Our payphones still here.
Yeah.
You know what's not still here?
I don't know. Lots of stuff.
Mr. Malcolm Young.
Ah,
Mr. Malcolm Young, folks, one of the guitarists for AC/DC and co-founder, brother of Angus. He passed away over the weekend, my friends. Yeah.
Well,
dang, I liked AC/DC. I mean, look, I'll be the first to admit all their songs sound the same, but still, I like them.
They all sound like good songs.
They all sound like good songs. And I liked all the guys because I was taller than all of them, which very few people I'm taller than, and they were one of them.
Well, I guess that's as good as reason as any, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I was like, dang, because we've lost all these artists, it seems like, since last year and this year. So I was like, dang, it's gone again. Oh, folks, goodness, thank y'all so much for the kind words in all the reviews that have been left. Look, we're trying to piece them all together. And you know what? We'll do our best to put together, because if we started rattling them off, we're going to have to make a whole show of us just saying thank you. So we're getting that worked out. Probably after the first of the year, we'll start doing the thank yous again and coming out with all of it. We'll go back and sprinkle y'all in. So we're not going to leave y'all out. Thank you so very much for writing all the reviews that you've written, and just the kind words and how well they're thought out and well they're written. And for those of you that haven't, please do. Please.
It's Cam's birthday week, folks.
Yeah, there you go. If you want to give me a birthday present, just write, this is your birthday. Here you go, and just give us a review. That would be awesome, because it's working great. It keeps us up there in the top, and that's the one way. If you don't want to be an elite member, we understand. No big deal. You don't have the money to spend. You don't want to spend it. I get it. But if you want to help out, write us a review, please.
Please. You got anything special planned for your last week before your birthday?
You make it sound like I'm dying.
Well, you're one more year closer to it for sure.
I'm like every day I think I'm close to it. I don't know. No, probably not. You know how it is. I never got, like I've said before, sneak peek into when I was a kid. I didn't get a birthday, folks. I got like 2 growing up. That was it. The whole thing. And then whenever my parents separated, I never really got a birthday until I was married. And then by the time all that went down, birthdays didn't really matter. Once you turn 21 in America, birthdays don't really matter. So
I do think it's kind of odd when you see like a 50-year-old having a big, party. You're just like, dude, you're like 50, man.
It just gives me an excuse to have everybody get together and us all just hang out. And that's the whole thing. We're going to go up there, have a few drinks. And like I said, we're going to party it hard until 6:30, and then we'll come home. That'll be that.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, we got Thanksgiving this week for people for here in the United States. So if you're out driving around or flying, please be safe out there. If you are flying, get to the airport a little early. The TSA does not mess around. They kind of got mad at me when I flew to California last week.
They're not the only ones that's probably got mad at you while you was flying to California.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like they expect me to know the protocol, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, could you just be a little nicer? But I get it. They're doing it all day long. Yeah. So it must be frustrating. I don't have the patience for that type of job. I know it, so I never would apply for something like that. God bless those people that can do it. But if you're out there traveling, please be safe. And for you elite members, we'll be talking to you again on Friday. For everybody else, we'll talk to you again next Monday. I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale.
Peace, y'all.
subscribe.